The huge horse took a couple of galloping steps and then leapt into the gate. They exited the gate just behind Pradicus's smoldering house. Andy jumped off the horse, followed by Derek. "If this gate took us here, shouldn't it have taken Velicious here also?" she asked. "Perhaps, but unlikely. He wouldn't have wanted to risk us following him wherever he jumped to," Jake answered. "We are only permitted to jump between windows, unless we're mapped, in which case we can jump anywhere." "We've got to find our gate guys," Derek said. Jake turned toward Derek and Andy, then said, "It's usually hidden in a confined area like a cave or a room or..." "Yes, over there under the house where we found the horse," Andy interrupted. The comment snatched Jake's attention. "What horse? There are no extra..." "Wait a minute," Derek said, cutting in. "Pradicus didn't even know about the riders, so how did he have one of their horses?" Jake offered a perplexed sigh. "Perhaps a plant by Velicious. But that would only be necessary if Pradicus were expected to become like me," he said, glancing toward Andy. An enormous bang cracked the sky, followed by a massive roar of fury. Ligue Nardre burst through the time gate and heaved its most substantial swell of fire ever. The Changus fell from the sky, lifeless and limp, and slammed to the earth with several snaps accompanied by one large crack. Derek and Andy ran, then dove for the ground, reliving their recent horror with the beast. Upon his noble steed, Jake stood his ground. The wing injuries sustained by the archer's arrows were evident via its unsharpened maneuvering. Nonetheless, it was alive and very much seeking a reckoning. It swung down and tried to make an attempt at Jake. Jake unclipped his whip and unleashed a thrashing upon the beast's face, causing the dragon to flinch on its pass. The horse stood true, fearless. Jake resecured the whip into its clip, then grabbed his crossbow and proceeded to shoot and reload in a rapid and precise effort. Many of the arrows simply bounced off the scaled armor, but the arrows that did land fell along the neck. The beast was careful not to open its wings into a full span within firing range on this occasion. As soon as Jake emptied his quiver of arrows, he slammed his crossbow to the ground and drew his long blade. The wind created from the wing thrusts had trees swaying and clothing dancing loosely. "Ah, Jake, no!" Andy screamed. She arose and took a running step toward Jake, but was grabbed at the ankle by Derek. "Let me go! He can't do this, Derek! We can save him!" She broke free and ran. The dragon circled around wide in the distance and came in shallow. There was no escaping this time. Andy, don't! I can't lose you again!" Derek screamed as the hope he held for the two of them began to fade before his eyes. He stood to his feet. The memories poured in. Her lips in the basement pantry, her tranquil voice while weathering storms from his loft, the glow of her skin on moonlit Saturday nights at Old Man Cutter's, her smiling face waiting for him on his stack of hay, and the flitting of her hair every time she turned away from him. "Oh my goodness," he said quietly, then bit his lip. "I'm in love with her. Oh God, I'm so in love with her." Time stood still for but a moment. Clarity found him. No matter where or when, he made a decision that it would be he who would stand beside her, before her and behind her. The honor to be the standard in her pursuit for love stood solely as utmost privilege. "Andy," he cried, "I love you." Andy held up and gazed back at him. Her expression exhilarated him and was worth the adventure's every daring second. She said nothing at first. Then her countenance fell as she exploded into a tearful tantrum. "Derek, why? Why now?" She clenched a fist and then threw it down. "I can't. I've got to go. I have to do this, Derek." She yelled and turned back toward Jake, beginning to run again. "Then your fate will be mine," Derek said quietly, breaking into a sprint. Andy reached Jake and seized his foot. "Come on, Jake. We can make it." She looked over her shoulder and the dragon had just started its final approach. "Jake, don't let me die with you." Jake looked down at her. "It's too late for me. This is the end that has been chosen for me. I'll face it boldly. Go. Let me see your face again. Please." Jake looked up and held off a second, then removed his hood. Then he glanced back down at her as Derek reached them. Andy saw the monster still, but who Jake was and what she knew of him were more pronounced. His voice had returned for the most part, with the exception of a shift from time to time, most notably when raising or lowering his pitch. He'd formed new skin, which made up his lips. His eyelids had begun to return. His eyes weren't as bulgy, and the veins had begun to recede, but the overall skull emphasis remained. It wasn't so much that his face seemed thinner, rather his skull was more prominent, as if it had expanded a bit while under the dragon's control. His overall beefier size hadn't begun to shrink either, a side effect he'd hoped to hold on to for a while longer. His strength remained as well as in the way he pulled Derek up onto the horse with considerable ease. But most importantly, the way Jake held his eyes was back. There was something about the confident, laid-back, I've got it all under control kind of look within and around his eyes that had always intrigued Andy. It was certainly something she never would have guessed about herself. He didn't come across as Prince Charming or the knight in shining armor to Andy, but rather the James Dean rebel sort who had an itch for trouble and had become well adept at handling it and in cool fashion. He was perhaps something along the lines of Derek, but rougher around the edges and quite a bit further out there on the edge itself. A bigger risk-taker for sure, but he almost always knew what he wanted and had the knack for getting it. You're beautiful, Jake, and I am your friend always. Always, Jake, she said slyly, unclipping his whip. She grasped the handle, then stepped away and turned her face to Derek's chest. The wind picked up mightily. Jake stood in his stirrups and held his blade high. "Fear me, behemoth," he yelled. He pulled a bottle of black powder from his saddle and flung it as far into the air ahead of him as he could. "Hold on to me," Andy said to Derek. Then she turned around and cast the whip around Jake's waist, then pulled him. Jake only fell back slightly and then turned to Andy. "No!" he cried in surprise. Lignor Dre swept in. The bottle landed next to its left eye and exploded. The dragon recoiled as it began to pass over Jake, beginning to lose its bearings, and with its eye disintegrated, the beast extended its neck back around and blindly snapped its jaws. Its orifice snatched a wide heap of grass, along with Jake and his horse. The beast repositioned the two within its mouth as it careened uncontrollably out across the river. The whip quickly reached its extended length and yanked Andy and Derek off the ground, ripping the handle from her grip. She could only watch as her friend was swept away, attached to the listless leather hanging down from Lignor Dre's mouth. "Jake," Andy cried, reaching her hand out after him. "This can't be the end. It's not supposed to go this way." She dropped her head and began to grieve for her friend. "Lord, I thought you were going to save him," she sobbed through her tears and with a defeated frown. Suddenly, an eruption exploded. The kraken reached its arms up and seized it, pulling it down in a grand splash. The plunge knocked the wind out of the dragon, causing it to hurl what it had just filled its mouth with. Huge splashes of water soared as the Titans fought. Bursts of fire lit up the horizon. The kraken continued to reposition its arms for a better hold, all the while trying to avoid the snapping jaws of its larger opponent. Finally, Lignor Dre swung its great tail around, landing a crushing blow against two of the kraken's arms, breaking itself free of the powerful grasp. It strained its wings in a powerful effort against the river's current and managed to extend them fully. With several enormous thrusts of its tail, it propelled itself up and out of the water enough to begin an ascent. Several more great flaps of its mighty wings gave it the boost it needed to break away. Against its smaller, less powerful, and certainly dispirited foe, it turned and blasted a prevailing pompous roar. Basking in a confidence laden with vengeance, it heaved its tail one last time in a lethal swing toward its river rival. The kraken countered with a sharp swerve, then seized the dragon's tail in a mammoth grip and immediately propelled itself downward, deep toward the bottom. Lig Nardre screeched in an unexpected panic as it plummeted once again into the river with a fantastic splash. The Kraken wrapped its tentacles around the dragon methodically and purposefully until it had the hold it wanted, and then squeezed with all its might. Several deep cracks and snaps made their way to Andy and Derek's ears. Hundreds of bubbles, great and small, rose to the water's surface for several moments. Suddenly, all at once, they stopped. The Kraken led the limp dragon down near the bottom of the river, then, with its massive strength, systematically dismembered it, tearing limb from body. In its final act of triumph, it wrapped one of its wounded arms around the head of Lig Nardre and crushed its skull, causing the carcass to drift to the bottom of the riverbed. Jake stepped out from the woods unscathed, covered in dragon phlegm. "Jake!" Andy hollered, then leapt up and ran to him. "Thank God! Jesus, thank you!" The three of them glanced over to the river and watched as the water settled. Jake pulled his hood over his face again. "You tried to save me anyway, Andy. Thank you. It's over now." She turned to Derek and laid her face in his chest again. "Really? It's over? It's really over?" she said, nearly unable to dare to tread there. She placed her arms around Derek's neck and then found her legs giving out. Derek held her in his arms and then knelt with her. He placed her head on his lap and stroked her hair. "It's over, Andy." She cupped her hand over her eyes and wept. "Hey, come on, we made it," he said, touching her face. "Wait, the berries. Is your gate still open?" Jake said. Derek looked up at him and shook his head. "We couldn't find them. We don't know if it's still open." "Well, you said you saw light in a small room under the house," Jake answered. Derek nodded. "Behind the house, over there," he said with a flick of his head. "There may still be time." He whistled. In a second, his stallion came galloping out of the woods in a head sprint. "Come, my friends." Derek helped Andy up, and out from a hidden pocket under her gown fell the 3 berries. Andy gasped with cheerful surprise. She and Derek both fixed their eyes on the 3 bouncing bits of hope until they came to rest, only to find them dried up and completely withered. The harsh reality stole Andy's breath. Derek watched her countenance fall. He sighed. "I guess we're stuck here for now." He held Andy by the shoulders. "Look, it's okay. I'm okay if we have to stay a little longer just until we can figure some things out. I want to learn about Romans and more about this amazing god. It'll be fine." "Maybe you're not stuck here," Jake said. Andy shifted her gaze from the berries over to Jake. Jake continued. "If I remember correctly, we were after Derek's emerald. That stone was taken from your time period. It will return to the same period unless it's been allocated to another. This time period doesn't count because this is where it was forged." "Wait a second. Are you telling me that my amulet started right here and made it all the way to me in the 21st century? Jake nodded. "Then who forged it?" Derek asked. "Felicius. About 20 years ago." "What? 20 years ago? But it's been, almost 1,000 years missing?" "No. Pradicus dismantled the Atlas and used time gates to spread the gems throughout time. Felicius has been after the gems ever since. If you had the emerald, you could go through any time gate and return to the time period from which it was taken." "How did you end up here then?" Andy asked. "You're not going to believe this. My watch." The number 12 on its face held the tip to a powerful stone, a diamond. That small diamond was cut and shaved into 100 pieces, and each piece had to be tracked down. Derek thought of the mound of bones in the cavern and the people they belonged to, and then shook his head in disgust. It was a very dark time here for many years, according to the traders. Many people fled the island and refused to come back after Felicius went crazy. He went on some kind of tyrannical crusade. The men I spoke with told me Laminus was one of the places they thought about living for the rest of their lives. "Laminus," Derek replied. "I saw that word on a sign in the scroll room under Pradicus's house. What is it?" "A sign? Jake asked. Immediately the recollection dawned. Yes, of course, the sign, not the Laminas sign, but the other sign, he thought to himself. He felt his face quickly prickle into a burning pink blush. His eyes ran toward Andy, quite certain that if Derek had seen the Laminas sign, he probably saw the other also, and he had to ask himself if Andy then saw it as well. The married life Jake once imagined for himself and Andy, unbeknownst to her, had finally been laid to rest. But here and now, months after daring to call her name out down the empty corridors of hope, he wondered if these returning thoughts were merely an echo of his own voice, or if Andy may have finally answered. He managed, obviously preoccupied. That's, the true name of this island, Jake said, questioning whether or not his thoughts actually were emerging over the entirety of his face as he felt they were. Could she be calling back? The answer to that question could change everything, he thought. It could be the reason she just tried to stop me from throwing my life away, why she approached me first in the cavern when Derek and I both sat on the horse, and why she called my name out for help when leaping away from Lignordre. He then continued. The government was a God-fearing people and named the island in honor of Jesus, the Lamb of God within us. They were a blessed people, but Valicious, in his rage, abolished the government and proclaimed himself ruler. He decreed that God didn't and couldn't exist and renamed the island for the absence of God, which he was sure was more accurate. He then warned that anyone referring to the island as Laminas again would be executed immediately. Helenus, how do you like that? Derek said. Well, we need to stop Valicious, then find the emerald to get us back to our time, Derek said. Realizing his secret was probably safe, and the timing of pursuing Andy due to the lack of time, he decided to let it go. For now. There's not a good chance of that. Another time gate won't open for quite some time now that Nordre's gone, Jake said. What about the Atlas? I thought he could go anywhere without the dragon's fire to assist him if he completed the Atlas, which he did, Derek said. Yes, but he jumped through the gate in a panic, Jake answered. And without the Atlas, Andy interjected. Wait, hey, she added before Derek cut in with a triumphant laugh. Well, then he can't do anything else. He has no power. So let's find the emerald and get back, Derek explained. Suddenly, Andy's comment caught up to them. He and Jake together turned to Andy. Wait a second, Derek said. How do you know whether or not he has the Atlas? She answered him with an insightful grin. Then all he has to do is get back to the Atlas, Derek responded. Jake nodded. Yes, but for some reason I feel it's been dismantled. A loss of comprehension enveloped Derek. So who dismantled the Atlas? Andy interrupted. Guys, we don't need to look very far. She pulled the glowing emerald from a second pocket on the underside of her skirt. The pocket's for carrying important things, she said with a smirk. She held it up to Jake with a questioning expression as she stared at its glow. You dismantled the Atlas? Derek asked, in utter astonishment. Well, I thought we might need the emerald. When? I mean, when did you have the chance to... Wishing he didn't have to go through with it, Jake shook his head, stepping in. That's not important. What is important is that you have the stone and are just beneath a gate. This gate will take you home. Andy smiled, staring at the emerald. It's not hot, even though it's glowing. Isn't that sort of strange? She asked, pocketing the emerald again. It'll always glow around the dark magic, Jake explained, and the dragon was just here. Its luster will diminish shortly. Well, it seems it dimmed a little, she said. Jake raised his arms out. Yes, let's not forget about me. I'm wrapped up in it completely. The stone should remain cool while illuminating until the dark magic is away from it. Thanks to you two, I broke free from the darkness. Perhaps I too will cease to exist in this state. He dropped his furs to the ground, revealing two well-developed arms extending out from a sleeveless tunic. It was the first time he'd given any notice to his body in months. Derek's eyebrows peaked as he studied the muscle on top of muscle definition within each arm. Andy glanced at first and then turned completely around, unaware of her plummeting chin. "Well, this state isn't all bad, I suppose," Jake added, oblivious to the other's gawking. "But it would be great if I could get back to being the old me. Again, thank you both." Unsure about how Jake would interpret their attention, she resumed her former position and then cleared her throat to gather Derek's attention. Derek looked down and smiled at Andy. "It wasn't the two of us, it was all her. She's the only one you need to thank. Well, and Pradicus, I guess." Andy smiled back and then turned away in a frown as her thoughts drifted to Pradicus. "I was sure he was going to meet us in the cavern," she said, barely squeaking the words out. 18 months of happy and sad times swarmed within the banks of her memory. "How could it happen?" she asked. "Is it really possible that you could go back to being Jake, the Jake from a few months ago?" "Anything's possible now that Lig Nor Dre is dead. The curse shouldn't keep much longer." He picked up the furs and refastened them, then gripped the horse's mane, and in a single hop, he was securely seated. "Climb up on Heracles here and we'll make sure you get through the gate." Derek helped Andy to her feet and then, with a running start, managed to leap up onto the tall steed. Jake reached down and took Andy by the hand, then effortlessly hoisted her up so that she sat directly behind him. She held on to Jake's coat of the furs, and Derek held her around the waist. The great horse started in on a trot and then blasted into a mad dash. Andy laughed as it was Derek's hind end in jeopardy this time. Heracles built up enough speed to vault off a quickly approaching peak. Andy adjusted her grip on Jake. "What about you?" she cried. "I'm going back for Velicious to finish what I started before he did this to me," he answered. Just then the emerald radiated fiercely. "Jiminy Christmas, what the?" she shouted just before the burning reached her leg. "Ouch, ouch, get it off!" she cried, staring down at its penetrating glow from within the pocket against her thigh. "Help me! It's burning me!" She let go of Jake and started slapping at it in an attempt to quickly alleviate the scorching. It seared a hole through her pocket and began to slide out, along with 3 shimmering gold coins. "The emerald! I'm losing it!" she screamed. She grasped it, but lost control of it when its heat punished her palm and fingers. It fell free from her open hand but sat hanging in midair, its brilliant glow remaining. Jake leaned back. "Jump on 3, 2, 1, go!" he yelled. His leaning back caused her to shift her balance. She began slipping off the horse but was caught by Derek. "Gotcha," Derek said, gripping her arm. The horse sprung off the peak into the sky, and all together they ascended toward the gate. As the horse went airborne, Derek's legs and rear lifted high off the horse's back. His hold of her arm was all that kept him from breaking free. In a reflex, she seized Jake's coat of furs to anchor herself. "Derek!" Andy cried. "Hold on!" He lost his hold of her as her arms slid through his grasp like a wet bus. He clutched her hand in one last-ditch effort. The grips each of them held for the other's hand began slipping away until they were connected by the tips of their fingers. The gate threshold's suction swirled, pulling and twirling Andy's hair as she held her eyes on Derek intently. She looked past Derek. "No!" she yelled. Suddenly, a horseman's whip wrapped itself around Derek's ankle, retaining him at the entrance of the gate. "Derek, find me!" she shouted, trying to speak over the rushing wind. "I love you." The feeble connection their hands shared gave way as Derek watched Andy, Jake, and Heracles pass through. "Andy!" he screamed fiercely, reaching his hand out toward her fading image. Suspended like a kite, he turned to see what had a hold of him. A brutal-looking horseman, unlike the others, had his lengthy whip extended and was reaching for his crossbow while sitting upon his own great steed. A vague familiarity churned Derek's discernment. The word shook him, even as it slipped from his mouth. Pradicus. He at first dismissed the thought, but then remembered what Andy had said about dragon saliva when she was telling him about Garen and Jake. It seemed impossible that Pradicus could be subjected to the dragon's will, but the proof sat in Pradicus's robes on a horse in front of him. The horseman took the weapon in a single hand, aimed, and fired. The arrow pierced the air with terrible speed. "Oh, God in heaven, help me now, I pray," he whispered, baring clutched fists. As Derek helplessly awaited the arrow's strike, he simply closed his eyes and surrendered to fate. Thoughts ran through his mind of how it should have been him there all along and never should have included Andy. He drew upon the memory of her expression as he told her of his love in the field a short while ago and decided it, if any, should be the expiring image he would depart with. As he became comfortable with his final moments, it became clear that too much time had passed. Perhaps the arrow had missed him. Was he actually afforded the opportunity for escape? He opened his eyes to an incredible sight. Time had in fact slowed to a near stillness, and the arrow had yet to land its deadly blow. As if someone had thrust it straight to the forefront of his thoughts, the recollection of Jake's knife sprung into his memory. Yes, that's it. He reached around, yanked it out from behind him, and, in a single swipe of its razored edge, cut himself free. The wormhole swallowed him instantly. A powerful light flashed, followed by a fall through darkness. Chapter 16.